Welcome to the TEFL Training Institute podcast, the bite-sized TEFL podcast for teachers, trainers, and managers.
Hi everyone. This week our guest is Ben Beaumont, TESOL Qualifications Manager at Trinity College London. So if you've done a qualification before, like the Trinity Cert TESOL or the Trinity Diploma in TESOL, well, those qualifications are managed by Ben. Ben in the past has also worked as a CELTA trainer, and he's currently studying his doctorate into the effect of English medium of instruction on lecturers in higher education. I spoke with Ben when he was in Shanghai recently, and we talked about teacher qualifications and reflection, reflective practice, reflexive practice, and how trainers can encourage those skills in their trainees. So I thought I could start off by asking about teacher qualifications, because
what I do.
What's been your personal experience with doing teacher qualifications?
They've helped me a lot. Well, my undergraduate degree was in English language and linguistics, so I learned about phonetics and phonology, and that led me to having an interest in teaching. So I went out to Japan for 2 years. I was an unqualified teacher working as an assistant English language teacher at a senior high school in Japan. So I didn't have any qualifications, but I did have subject knowledge. And I noticed that I was lacking in a skill. And then when I went back to the UK, I did my Cert TESOL, I learned what I was missing. There were skills that a teacher has that someone who isn't a teacher doesn't have. And so the course enabled me to learn those skills. I then thought I was a good teacher. I had some skills and I had some subject knowledge. I taught for a couple of years. I then went on to do my Delta. And I thought I was a good teacher. That showed me that I wasn't actually a good teacher. And by doing the qualification, I learned more about what I should be doing. I know should is a difficult word, but it enabled me to analyse mine and others' teaching, which had a kind of cyclical effect of just making me better and better and better as a teacher. It was a case of, you're teaching like this, think about it, how does it work with the class you're teaching? So it made me be quite evaluative and reflective on my teaching, which then in turn made me better.
Do you want to talk a bit more about those skills to reflect then, and like what are they, and how does a trainer help a teacher gain those skills? Because it does seem to be almost sounds a bit more like a personality characteristic, isn't it? Like you're a reflective person. Rather than maybe a specific skill that you might think people can learn.
Some might say, if you're more kind of introverted or extroverted as to whether or not you think more about yourself or other people and so on. And I think some people have more of a natural aptitude at it than others, but I think it is something that can be learned, because I wasn't very good at it, and now I am, I would like to think, fairly good at it. There's definitely a piece about self-awareness, and I think there's a piece about maturity there as well. So the more self-aware you are in relation to your context and your fellow human beings, I think that helps. There are, of course, loads of different models that you can follow to be reflective. Okay, so Kolb's reflective cycle is very kind of concrete experience. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? Change it for next time. Or then you've got Gibbs, who talks about adding in an emotional element. There's Brookfield's 4 lenses, where you look at yourself from your own point of view, from a colleague's point of view, from your student's point of view, and from a kind of theoretical literature point of view, and think, well, what would my colleague was watching this lesson, what would they think? Or if I was that student X, well, how would they kind of look at my lesson? Or if I was Brunner or Vygotsky watching this, how would they look at my lesson through a constructivist lens? And so doing those kind of activities, I think it helps you become more aware of how different people will see doing different things. And I think raises that self-awareness, which makes you think, well, actually, I thought that was a really good lesson, but X student probably thought it was a rubbish lesson, but then somebody else probably thought it was an even better lesson and the best lesson they ever saw. And so it's all very subjective, and you start to appreciate the subjectivity. So I think, yes, some people are like that naturally, but it can be encouraged through using different models of reflection, or simply by on a Socratic method just by asking questions. And at a cert TESOL CELTA level, that's what happens on the reflection form at the end of a teaching session. What went wrong, or what went well, what didn't go well, what do you plan to do next time? Those kind of questions, and those questions are mirroring the kind of Kolb or Gibbs level of reflection. At a TESOL Delta level, hopefully you're going for something a bit more, and bringing in kind of emotional elements, you're bringing in the theoretical elements, and I think it's up to the trainer very much to guide the trainee, the course participant. You can't expect, just as you can't expect anyone to know something they haven't been taught. I think it's imperative and inherent in the role of the trainer to be able to ask the types of questions which follow the kind of models of Brookfield or whoever, to guide the course participant, the teacher, to make that reflection.
Is that kind of Vygotsky type thing there, where the trainees are in their, they can't quite get there themselves, but the trainer's asking these questions and pushing the person a bit beyond that?
Absolutely. And so you've got you mentioned Vygotsky, you've got the ZPD, the zone of proximal development, and where the teacher is, or the learner, whoever it is, and you need to kind of help them move on, or you might bring in the scaffolding. So what questions do we ask to scaffold that learning, to make it move to this where you are now +1? And if you ask a question which is too high, then of course, let's say a +2 type question, intelligence +2, then whoever it is, the teacher, the learner, isn't going to get there. So
because you're moving them beyond the zone of proximal denial. It's too far.
Exactly. And it's a really important skill for a trainer to be able to develop. You said in another conversation we had earlier, it's like if you could have one sentence about teaching, it would be, actually, tell me what it was.
I think it was like ascertain where the learner is and teach them accordingly, something like that.
Exactly, and it's the same thing for the trainer. Find out where the teacher is and train them accordingly. And for some, they'll be at a basic level of Kolb or Gibbs reflective cycle, and some might be at a much deeper level and able to understand reflexive practice instead of reflective practice, and so on. You can push them that far.
Do you want to talk about that then a bit, about like after going through that reflection, how does that then impact maybe the teacher's thought processes when they're in the class?
I mean, I think teachers know when they're teaching, and I think you're alluding a bit to Schoen, I guess, reflection in action and reflection on action. When you're in a class and you know that something is going well or not going well, and you have that horrible feeling inside when a class isn't, or an activity isn't going well, and you just want it to stop, or you just want to change it, but you don't know how to change it. And if you can change it and make an intervention, brilliant. It's what might be called reflection in action. You think, okay, this has gone wrong, I'm going to do it now and change it. Whereas after the class, it might take a bit of time to think about it, discuss it, and a kind of Socratic dialogue model, talk about it with a colleague, with a peer, with a knowing other, and then reflect on what happened and think about, well, next time, how can I change that?
So how do those two interact then? Is it a case of like you ideally want people to be the reflecting in action, where they're able to sort of solve the problems in real time, and the reflection on action is like, well, how did I not manage to make that happen, or is it more complex than that? I
think it's probably more complex, and I know that the thinking about Schoen's reflection in action and on action, there's some debate about exactly what is in action and what is on action, and it's perhaps saying that in action is when it happens and on action is afterwards is perhaps a little simplistic. But I think for the purposes of discussion, I think it's okay to talk about it like that. Yes, we do want teachers to be able to reflect in action. But there are sometimes there's just not the cognitive processing ability of the teacher to be able to do that. To give an example, when a student asks you a tricky question and says, "Teacher, why do we say X, Y, Z?" First thing you say as a teacher is, good question. And
ask me after class.
Well, you say ask me after class, or one technique. The other one is, good question. And you pause. Let's just get some examples on the board. And you say good question. Why do you say good question? Why do you say let's get some examples on the board? And you turn to the board and you start to write some examples. The students give you examples, you write them on the board. And when I'm at the board, I'm no longer looking at the students. I no longer have 10 pairs of eyes staring at me waiting for an answer. I'm at the board and I'm just writing. whereas my mind is furiously processing something and coming up with the answer to answer the student's question. And I just need that time to think. When you're in a classroom, sometimes you don't have that time to think. You're standing in front of a group of 10, 20, 30 people. They're all looking at you wanting an answer, and you're trying to arrange a class, arrange your activities, think about what's next, think about what's happened, how to respond, and there isn't that cognitive ability to process it all. So sometimes we need to make the cognitive space, cognitive breathing room, we might say, in order to reflect in action. And sometimes it's just not possible. And where it's not possible, then we might do it afterwards, and it might be reflection on action when you have that space to think about it.
In terms of getting teachers to reflect in action, I've sometimes heard about trainers doing things like in the class, so while the teacher is teaching, to sort of like prompt the teacher maybe to do something, you know, like you're echoing, or, you know, look at the student in the back row, their clothes are on fire, or whatever it is. What do you think about that? Is that something that in action, is that something that as trainers can sort of prompt teachers to do, or is that?
I think that depends very much on what the trainer believes is an effective training method. Some trainers like to have a kind of fourth wall, to borrow from the kind of theatre stage expression, where you go to the theatre, action takes place on the stage, you pretend the audience isn't there. Similar kind of thing. In a classroom, you're teaching the class, but then behind, off the stage, you've got the trainer watching. You pretend they're not there, but actually they are there. So this pretend situation. So is it a pretend situation that the observer, the assessor, whatever is at the back, not interacting, or do they say, how much do they lend a hand? I've heard of classes where trainer will get up, tell the teacher to re-instruct. Wow. In a live class. There are problems with that. I have big issues with that, because I think that removes the autonomy, the power of the teacher. But it kind of depends on the needs of the teacher or the trainee. I've had a situation where a trainee has just frozen in front of a class. Wow. And I've had to take over for them just while they recover and just get their stuff back together, and then they can carry on. But except in those kind of serious situations, I'd probably say try not to be overly interventionalist. You've got to respect the teacher's role in front of the class, and you don't want them to lose the trust of the students. However, saying that, you also don't want them to do rubbish stuff. So it's a balancing act. Because
you want sort of two sets of learners, don't you? There's the students, right? You don't want them to have an awful experience, right? Which means that you sort of want the teaching to be good, but also the teacher's a learner.
Exactly.
You don't want to sort of impact on their learning experience.
Indeed. And just as we might say with a student, if there's an oral, let's say some kind of discussion, and the student makes an error, do you stop them straight away mid-discussion and say, you've made an error, fix this, or you've made the error, what's the right thing? You've interrupted that natural flow of dialogue, and then they start again. You say, oh no, you've made another error. You've made another error. And then slowly what you're doing is preventing that learner from being fluent. They stop and they hesitate and they look at you, am I doing it right, am I not doing it right? And they lose the fluency, the confidence in being able to speak. I believe that's very much the same way with a teacher. If you keep interrupting the teacher and saying, no, you've done it wrong, do it this way, you've done it wrong, do it this way, the teacher's always going to be trying to second guess the trainer at the back of the room, and they're going to lose their fluency of teaching. They're not going to have that confidence. I think teaching, like speaking, requires a great deal of confidence to carry it through and help the students. And of course, it does depend on the role of that person, that trainer or assessor at the back of the room. Is the person there for evaluation? Are they there for guidance or support? So I think the role of the trainer at the back of the room will very much depend on the type of intervention they have with the teacher, if any. And if there is going to be some intervention, that should be made absolutely clear with the teacher beforehand. So the teacher knows, okay, this trainer is going to interrupt if they think there's something bad. And then they know it's not going to be a problem.
Once again, that was Ben Beaumont, TESOL Qualifications Manager at Trinity College London. Hope you enjoyed the show, and see you again next time.
For more podcasts, videos, and blogs, visit our website www.tesoltraininginstitute.com.
If you've got a question or a topic you'd like us to discuss, leave us a comment.
And if you want to keep up to date with our latest content, add us on WeChat at TESOL Training Institute.
And if you enjoy our podcast, please rate us on iTunes.